Blood Omen was one of those games that I just got lost in. The kind where you look at the clock and realize it's 3 a.m. just wondering how it got so late. Because you just got sucked so deep into it. From the start, the writing and voice work really pull you into Kain's journey. And the game takes its time letting the world and its rules settle in around you. Powers build as you move forward, and the experience slowly shifts from action to presence. Until by the end, you're so detached from humanity that you only have to exist for death to follow you. So, what was Blood Omen Legacy of Kain?
Their sneering faces were forever etched upon my memory. I had crossed death for this moment. My mind was empty save for one thought. I would kill.
When Blood Omen came out in '96, the PlayStation was still settling into what its RPG and action-adventure games looked like. A lot of games at the time leaned on familiar structures, clear goals, and readable arcs. Blood Omen arrived with a top-down view, long narration, and a tone that immediately felt heavier. It carried itself like a dark fantasy story first, and that came through before you ever understood how the game worked.
As if you knew what eternity was. Grovel before your true master.
Never. I'll hack you from crotch to gizzard and feed what's left to your brides.
At its core, Blood Omen places you in the role of Kain, a man murdered and brought back as a vampire, set loose in a world that's already decaying. The setup is pretty simple. You're moving across Nosgoth, hunting those responsible for your death, and slowly uncovering what that journey actually means.
Ironic that now I was the one suffering. Not anything as pedestrian as physical pain, rather the cruel jab of impotent anger.
As you travel, you grow stronger, gain new abilities, and begin to understand that your role in this world reaches far beyond revenge. The game just lets that idea settle in as you play. The project came out of Silicon Knights working with Crystal Dynamics, with Dennis Dyack shaping the original pitch. The game began as an idea called the Pillars of Nosgoth. There is a sense of intention behind it. The scope feels planned out, and the story feels like it was meant to stretch across a full journey instead of just circling a single idea. That top-down action RPG structure supports that goal. It allows the world to stay connected as you move through it, and it keeps combat grounded in a physical space. You're always close to what's happening. The towns, the ruins, and open areas, they flow together at a steady pace. And over time, Nosgoth starts to feel like a place with history, rather than a sequence of locations. The tone sets Blood Omen apart from the very start of the game. The writing carries weight, and the voice work gives the dialogue a sense of authority. Kain's performance stands out because of how measured and deliberate it sounds. Conversations linger, narration takes its time. The game assumes the player is willing to listen and absorb what's being said. And the narrative sits at the center of that experience. The dialogue, history, and consequences all matter, and they build gradually as you explore. The world feels worn down and damaged in ways that aren't explained all at once. You pick it up through fragments, through the way characters speak, and through the spaces you move through. That focus gives Blood Omen a presence that feels older than its release date. It carries itself with confidence, leaning into tone and ambition in its story. From the beginning, it establishes its own identity and commits to it, setting the foundation for everything that follows.
And maggots fed upon his festering skin. The scent of tainted blood seeped through the wounds upon which they feasted. Pity. Such a waste. Good blood gone bad.
Feeding sits right at the center of how Blood Omen works, and the game makes that clear pretty quickly. Kain's health is tied directly to blood, so staying alive means staying aware of it. You feel it when you take damage, you feel it as time passes without feeding. It becomes something you track in the back of your mind as you move through the world. Blood comes from enemies, and different sources affect you in different ways. Some restore health, some are toxic. And that detail stays present with you throughout the whole game. Enemies become part of how you keep going. Every fight carries that understanding with it. Feeding happens right in the middle of combat. You wound an enemy, drain them, and keep moving. That action stays continuous. Everything takes place in the same space and follows that same rhythm. And over time, feeding settles into your movement and becomes something you do naturally without stopping to think about it. That loop shapes how the game feels minute to minute. Blood stays tied to survival in a very direct way. Combat carries purpose because it supports that need. Each encounter feeds into that same system that keeps you standing and moving forward. As you spend more time with the game, that rhythm settles in further. Enemies feel woven into the spaces you move through. Feeding feels like part of a traversal rather than a separate interaction. The game reinforces that relationship through repetition, letting that system just speak for itself. That's where the foundation of power begins to take shape. Blood supports strength, strength supports presence. Staying alive and holding space starts to feel linked. The game allows that idea to settle naturally through playing it, letting you absorb it through how everything fits together. The combat in Blood Omen is built around forward motion. It's a real-time system that keeps you close to danger and asks you to stay engaged with the space around you. You swing weapons, move directly into enemies, and hold ground as fights play out. The game keeps combat physical and immediate, and that feeling stays consistent throughout the whole game. Movement and attack are closely linked. You approach enemies, commit to a space, and resolve encounters through presence rather than distance. There's a steady push towards engagement that shapes how you play it. The combat rewards staying active and occupying the center of a fight. It isn't like a lot of other action games where you're waiting for openings or managing defensive states. In this, you're pressing forward and letting momentum carry you through. Weapons play a big role in reinforcing that approach. As Kain collects new tools, each one adds a different feel to the combat. Swords, maces, axes, and then near the end, the Soul Reaver. They all carry their own sense of weight. Swings land with purpose, hits feel deliberate. You start to recognize how each weapon changes the way encounters unfold without needing to stop and analyze it. The progression supports that feeling in a really direct way. The gear upgrades and blood vials increase health, and you can upgrade energy capacity, and those increases show up immediately in how fights feel. You stay in combat longer, you cast more spells, you absorb more punishment without losing control of the space around you. Kain's growth isn't abstract. It shows up through his endurance and presence. Strength upgrades deepen that effect. Drinking from blood fountains increase raw power, can make your magic regenerate faster, and grant resistances that stay with you as you move forward, like rain not burning you. Those changes don't really announce themselves loudly. You notice them through how stable combat feels and how little effort it takes to stay standing. As the systems stack together, combat starts to feel settled. Enemies react to you more than you react to them. Groups thin out once you commit to a space. Encounters resolve through momentum rather than careful adjustment. You move forward, swing through resistance, and just keep going. Structurally, all of this reinforces the same idea. The tools support the presence, growth supports control, combat supports authority. The game lets that relationship build naturally through repetition, allowing you to feel how hard it becomes to stop Kain simply by staying engaged with the system.
I entered the court with the dollmaker's head in one hand and the doll containing the girl's soul in the other. I placed them both before the king and watched his eyes catch fire.
Abilities in Blood Omen keep stacking as you play. You end up with a large set of tools by the time the world fully opens up. Spells come in early and continue to grow throughout the journey. Ones like Sanctuary gives you a way to return to safety. Light and energy-based spells give you reach and control in combat. Offensive magic becomes part of how encounters resolve as you move forward. Using spells feels immediate and grounded. You cast them where you stand, and the results play out around you without interrupting movement.
We will send you back to the grave, whence you came, vampire.
The visuals are really insane for this. A lot of the tools and spells are genuinely gruesome. Flay strips flesh from enemies, leaving blood and bone to fall to the ground. The game gives that moment enough space to register, and the image really stays with you. As your list of spells grow, you start leaning on them more naturally. Some spells help manage groups, others deal with specific threats quickly. Magic settles into your hands as another way of shaping the space around you. You don't need to pause or rethink your approach for this. Casting becomes part of how you move through fights. Shape-shifting adds another layer to that feeling. Each form changes how you travel through Nosgoth, and how the world responds to you. Bat form allows you to instant travel between places you've already reached. Wolf form increases speed and makes movement feel forceful. And the mist form lets you pass through obstacles and restricted spaces, like walking on water, and the human form opens up certain interactions and access points tied to the world itself. Switching forms becomes familiar over time. You choose what fits the space you're in and continue forward. The world adjusts to that choice immediately. Movement, access, and positioning shift based on how you decide to exist in the space. As these abilities grow, your presence in the world becomes more flexible. Traversal opens up, options expand. You move through areas with a steady confidence that comes from having the right tools at hand. The game reinforces that feeling simply by letting you use those abilities again and again. Taken together, spells and forms reshape how you exist in Nosgoth. You choose how to move, how to engage, and how to occupy space. Violence, movement, and magic supports the same growing sense of authority. Before we keep going, I just want to take a second and say thank you to everyone who's made it this far into the video. It really does mean a lot. And if you're enjoying this and you like the idea of preserving these games one at a time, building out an archive for them, consider subbing to the channel, and dropping a like really helps out a lot too. Leaving a comment helps even more. But if you played Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, I'd love to hear what your memories with it are. Let me know when you first played it, or what stuck with you the most. And if this is your first time seeing the game, I'd like to hear about that too. I read every comment, and even though it's getting harder to respond to them all, I really try to respond to as many as I can. For anyone watching on mobile, there's also the hype button. Clicking that gives the video hype points, which helps it get pushed out into the algorithm more. It's basically a way of telling YouTube, hey, this video is good, more people should watch it. We're also getting really close to 10,000 subs. I feel like I talk about sub count a lot, but the rate it's been growing is just still crazy to me. We're only a few days away from the 1 year mark for the channel, and seeing it almost reach 10,000 in under a year, that's beyond than anything I ever expected for this channel. I thought maybe a handful of people would be into this kind of content, and the amount of support you all have shown me, it really does mean a lot. I'm really glad there's still room for slower videos like this, a place where we can just take our time and talk about the games that meant something to us, and just sit with them for a bit. Knowing that so many of you feel the same way and keep showing up for it, just thank you. But that's enough of that. Let's get back into Blood Omen and talk about how combining these tools and spells properly lets Kain become completely untouchable and gives you a true sense of power. One of my favorite combinations in Blood Omen comes from how a few abilities interact when you let them run together. The Chaos Armor sits at the center of that. When it's active, any enemy that hits you takes damage themselves. That damage feeds back into them immediately. And over time, you start noticing how often the attackers end up staggering or falling simply from just touching you. And Repel fits cleanly into that setup. Casting Repel creates a barrier around Kain that absorbs incoming attacks. You stay in place, and the hits never reach you directly. The Chaos Armor continues to function that entire time. Every swing that reaches you still triggers the armor's effect. Enemies keep hurting themselves every time they try to break through. When that spell and armor is active together, the result is insane. You stand still, attacks land against the barrier, damage reflects back outward. Enemies rush towards you and begin collapsing as they just touch you. The system keeps resolving itself around you without asking for input. That moment carries a lot of weight. You aren't swinging weapons, you're not casting a bunch of offensive spells. You aren't even repositioning, you're just present, and the space around you reacts to that presence. Watching enemies fall apart while you remain untouched makes the scale of Kain's power feel tangible. Combining abilities like this show how much control the game eventually places in your hands. Power comes from how the systems overlap and reinforce each other. None of these spells exist in isolation. They work together and create outcomes that feel earned through understanding and time spent inside the game. Stuff like this changes how combat registers emotionally. Action fades into the background, the movement slows down. Attention shifts to the result rather than the effort. You see how powerful Kain has become through what no longer needs to happen. He just stands there, and anything that comes near him dies, and he doesn't have to flinch. That feeling stays with you because it's not framed as a moment of spectacle. It's just stability. You occupy space, and the world adjusts around you. The game gives you room to sit inside that power and watch it unfold.
Has your house burned? No! Will you allow this evil to continue? No! Will the wickedness end? Yes! Do you believe? Yes!
When you spend time moving through Blood Omen, Nosgoth starts to feel heavy in a way that really sticks with you. You notice it pretty quickly. The lands look worn down, the structures look like they've been standing too long. The atmosphere sits low and thick no matter where you go. That feeling sticks with you as you move around. The towns don't really feel like places you want to stay in. You pass through them, you take in what they are, and you keep moving. The streets are tight, buildings feel strained, people keep their distance. There's a sense that everyone is just getting by. You don't feel invited to settle in. You feel like you're passing through something that's already uncomfortable with your presence. The ruins and dungeons lean even harder into that mood. The walls are broken, paths are collapsed inward. Rooms feel empty in a way that carries history with it. You can tell a lot has already happened in these places long before you arrived. You're not uncovering something new as much as you're walking through what's left behind. The game lets the environments do most of the talking. You don't get long explanations about what went wrong. You see it in the layout. You feel it in the space. Crumbling structures, abandoned areas, and corrupted locations tell you plenty just by existing the way they do. You pick it up naturally as you move through each area. Traveling between places reinforces that feeling. You spend a lot of time moving alone. Roads stretch out, open land sits empty around you. The distance between locations give everything room to breathe in an uncomfortable way. You feel exposed while moving through it, like the world isn't offering much shelter. Enemies feel like part of that space. They don't feel staged or dramatic, really. They feel like they belong where they are. Creatures roam roads, ruins, and wilderness as part of the land itself. Running into them feels expected. It fits the mood Nosgoth carries everywhere. That tone stays consistent as you keep going. Each new area carries the same sense of decay and tension. The atmosphere doesn't lift. The world keeps its weight, and you start to understand that Nosgoth isn't just a setting or a backdrop. It's more of something you're moving through that has its own presence. Emotionally, that shapes the whole journey. This world isn't comfortable. You don't feel welcomed by it. Movement feels necessary, and standing still doesn't offer much. You keep going because that's the only way to exist inside this place. And after a while, Nosgoth starts to feel like its own character. The land presses in around you. It shapes how the journey feels without needing to announce itself. You carry that weight with you as you move forward, and it becomes part of how Blood Omen stays in your head. One of the things that really sets Blood Omen apart is how much weight the voices carry. The game leans hard on dialogue, and it treats voice acting as part of the atmosphere rather than just a way to move the plot along. Every major character speaks with intention. You hear pauses, you hear restraint, you hear history sitting behind the words.
Things come with the night that no sane man would welcome. And so I left, cold of heart and soul, forced to the road and the long, bitter night.
Kain's voice sets that tone immediately. His delivery feels measured and deliberate. He doesn't rush lines or explain himself. He speaks like someone who believes what he's saying matters. As you spend more time with him, the voice starts to feel like an extension of how you move through the world. It slows the pace. It makes moments linger. You start listening closely because the game gives you a reason to.
Of darkness restores vampiric unlife. Life is precious, Janos discovered, as it was torn, throbbing and bleeding from his own body.
The people Kain meet along the way carry that same weight. Allies don't feel clean or comforting. Antagonists don't feel cartoonish. Everyone speaks with their own agenda sitting just under the surface. Conversations feel layered, like there's always something being held back. You get the sense that no one is telling you everything and no one feels obligated to. Vorador stands out because of how much presence he has when he speaks. His lines carry age, bitterness, and experience. He talks like someone who has watched the world rot over a long stretch of time. There's confidence in his voice, along with a quiet contempt that bleeds into every interaction. Spending time with him feels like being allowed into a mindset rather than being given guidance.
They can feast on your corpses!
Keep your distance!
Ariel's presence carries a different kind of weight. Her voice feels distant and restrained. She speaks with purpose, but never with warmth. Every interaction feels important, even when it's brief. You listen because her words feel tied to consequences that extend beyond the moment. Mobius brings a sense of manipulation into every conversation. His dialogue carries certainty and control. He speaks like someone who believes events bend naturally around him. There's an unsettling calm to the way he delivers information. You feel guided and directed at the same time, even when you don't fully understand what's being set in motion. What really sticks out is how the dialogue itself is written. Lines feel theatrical in structure and delivery. Characters speak in complete thoughts. They reference fate, consequence, history, and power without softening the language. Conversations feel deliberate. You don't get the sense that anyone is trying to reassure you or make things easier to process. There's also a noticeable absence of moral comfort in how people speak. Nobody frames Kain's journey as righteous. Nobody offers reassurance or approval. Conversations don't exist to make you feel better about what you're doing. They exist to acknowledge what's happening and move forward with it.
Dead. As are you.
That tone seeps into how you experience the story. Dialogue doesn't interpret gameplay, it deepens it. You carry the weight of those conversations with you as you move through Nosgoth. The lines linger in your head long after they're spoken. You start anticipating what certain characters might say because their voices have become part of the world's identity.
His guise as the Oracle served his schemes well. Pity with all his plots he failed to plan for you.
The theatrical delivery works because the game commits to it fully. Characters don't break that tone. They don't slip into casual phrasing or modern humor. Every voice feels anchored to the same world and the same emotional space. That consistency makes conversations feel heavy without needing to be loud. And over time, the voices begin to shape how you view the journey itself. You don't feel guided by heroes or villains. You feel surrounded by people who have already made their choices and are living with them. The dialogue reflects that reality through restraint, confidence, and a quiet contempt.
At our whim! Stand with us, Mortanius, or die.
Then I shall die.
The voices of Blood Omen feel inseparable from the experience. The characters here aren't really explaining the world or the story. They're just part of it. Their words carry history, intent, and consequence, and that weight stays with you as the story continues forward.
And its calculated repercussions is but the first act in my theater of grand guignol, of which you are the tragic hero. Play on, little vampire. Play on.
Fey Victus!
Before getting into the specifics of how Nosgoth works, it's worth talking about how Blood Omen handles lore in general. The game doesn't present its history in neat chunks or long explanations. You pick it up gradually as you move through the world. Pieces surface through conversations, locations, and small moments that stick with you. Over time, those pieces start to form a larger picture. What stands out is how the lore feels present even when it isn't being explained directly. You can sense that the world is operating on rules that existed long before Kain's journey began. There's a feeling that things are already in motion, already strained, already carrying consequences. You don't need to understand every detail right away to feel that weight. The story treats history as something lived in, rather than something recited. Characters speak as if the systems and events are familiar to them. Locations reflect past decisions and long-standing damage. You move through spaces that feel shaped by choices made generations earlier. That gives the world a sense of depth without stopping the momentum of the game. As you spend more time with it, the lore starts to feel less like background information and more like a framework holding everything together. You begin to understand that Kain isn't stepping into an empty story. He's moving through a world already defined by structure, obligation, and consequence. That understanding sets the tone for everything. With that in mind, the Pillars and the Guardians become easier to grasp. They aren't introduced as trivia or world-building flavor. They exist as the foundation that Nosgoth is built on. And that quietly shapes every part of the journey.
Nopraptor, your madness has shattered our dreams and blinded you.
Keep your distance, or I'll send you back to hell, spirit!
The world operates through a system that governs its health and stability. At the center of that system are the Pillars of Nosgoth. There are 9 of them, and each one is directly tied to a human guardian. The condition of the land follows the condition of those pillars, and the pillars reflect the state of the people bound to them. Those guardians together form the Circle of 9. Each guardian holds responsibility for a specific aspect of balance within the world. Their roles are active and functional. When a guardian is stable, their pillars stand strong. When a guardian is corrupted or damaged, that instability carries over into the pillar and outward into Nosgoth itself. There's an important rule built into this structure. When a guardian dies, the role does not disappear. A new guardian is summoned or appointed to take that place. The position continues even as the individual changes. That rule gives the system a sense of permanence and momentum. The structure moves forward regardless of who occupies it. As you spend time in the game, the idea starts to settle in. Nosgoth feels shaped by repetition and continuity. Guardians rise and fall. Pillars endure across generations. The damage you see throughout the world feels tied to stress within the system rather than a single moment of collapse. That's where a lot of the weight comes from. The condition of the world reflects pressure inside its core framework. The system that maintains balance carries strain, and that strain shows up everywhere. Towns feel unstable, ruins feel neglected, landscapes carry the signs of something that's been wearing down over time. Understanding the Pillars and the Guardians shifts how the story reads. Events don't feel isolated, actions connect back to a larger picture that governs how Nosgoth exists. Kain's journey unfolds inside that framework, and every major moment carries consequences tied to it. This foundation supports everything else in Blood Omen. The lore lets the systems exist in the background while you move through the world, gradually revealing how much of Nosgoth's fate is tied to rules that were already in motion long before Kain entered the picture.
For help do you vampire. Trade your secrets for the blood of the dead, I will.
Once the structure of the Pillars and the Guardians settle in, the corruption in Blood Omen starts to read as something built into the system itself. The Circle of Nine carries that corruption, and it moves through the same connections that keep Nosgoth functioning. The damage spreads through roles, responsibilities, and bonds that already exist. Each Guardian remains tied to a pillar, and that bond stays active at all times. When a Guardian becomes corrupted, that condition transfers directly into the pillar that they're linked to, like I had mentioned. The pillar weakens, and the land responds to that weakness. The state of Nosgoth reflects those connections playing out across the entire framework. That process gives corruption a physical presence. The system continues operating, and it does so while carrying damage forward. Pillars remain standing while showing strain. Guardians remain in place while holding that strain within them. The structure stays intact enough to function, and that function allows corruption to move through every connected piece. Kain's role fits cleanly into that framework. His quest places him in direct contact with these points of failure. He hunts corrupted Guardians and restores their pillars using tokens tied to each role. Every step interacts with the same system that governs the world's balance. Moving through that process makes the scale of the damage feel tangible. Each Guardian represents a stress point. Each pillar reflects the cost of that stress. As you travel, the lands carry visible signs of that pressure through worn environments and unstable spaces.
The antler headdress had broken in the fight, but power still resided in its ivory form.
Over time, the idea of corruption settles into something mechanical. It behaves like contamination, moving through a machine that continues running. The system allows that contamination to spread because its rules remain active. Every connected element participates in that process. That's where the weight of the lore really lands. Nosgoth operates through a spiritual infrastructure, and corruption exists as damage within that infrastructure. The framework holds together while carrying that damage, and the world reflects the strain through its condition and atmosphere.
The headdress of the druid bane I lay before the nature pillar. The pillar accepted its offering. Thus, it was restored.
Understanding corruption this way changes how the journey feels. Kain moves through a world shaped by long-term damage that has already embedded itself into the system. Every action he takes interacts with that structure and feeds back into it. That's how Blood Omen treats lore as weight. Corruption spreads through roles, connections, and obligations that continue forward. You feel that spread through the land, through the quest, and through the way the systems keep moving while carrying its own decay. Kain's relationship with vampirism starts at a very personal level. He begins as a nobleman who is murdered and left for dead. Mortanius finds him in that state and brings him back through necromancy. That act reshapes Kain completely. He returns to the world as a vampire, bound to a condition that changes how he exists in every moment that follows. At first, that condition feels closely tied to revenge. Kain wakes up angry, focused, and driven by the need to answer what was done to him. Mortanius offers him a path forward, and Kain takes it. The decision carries him back into the world with a new form and new needs. Blood becomes central to survival. Power begins to grow alongside that need. As Kain moves forward, vampirism starts to feel less like a single event and more like an inheritance. It connects him to older forces and longer histories within Nosgoth. His condition places him inside systems that existed before his death. Vampirism ties him into the same structure that governed balance, decay, and continuity across the world. That connection deepens as the story progresses. Kain's existence as a vampire becomes linked to the condition of the land itself. His actions interact directly with the Pillars and the Guardians. His presence starts to carry weight beyond personal motivation. Vampirism settles into a role that feels structural rather than temporary. Over time, the idea of inevitability starts to take shape. Kain doesn't simply carry vampirism as a trait. He embodies it as part of Nosgoth's ongoing collapse and imbalance. His survival, his power, and his continued existence feed into the same machinery that governs the world's fate. That's where vampirism stops feeling like a transformation and starts feeling like a position within a much larger framework. Kain moves forward bound to systems that continue operating around him. His condition ties him to outcomes that extend beyond his own understanding at the moment he accepts Mortanius' offer. This is what gives vampirism its weight in Blood Omen. It exists as a curse that reshapes life, an inheritance passed through ancient systems, and inevitability that carries Kain deeper into Nosgoth's fate. The game allows that meaning to settle gradually through actions, consequences, and repetition, rather than explanation. As the story opens up, you start to get a sense of how far back Nosgoth's history actually goes. Events in Blood Omen don't feel isolated to the present moment. They feel connected to decisions and violence that happened long before Kain ever existed. Early on, you learn about the Circle of Nine and their involvement with Seraphan, an order created to hunt vampires. That decision set a direction for the world that carried consequences far beyond its original intent. The Seraphan became a force that shaped the balance of power across Nosgoth, and that influence stayed embedded in the land. Vorador's response to that era adds another layer. His retaliation against the Circle, including the killing of 6 Guardians and the defeat of Malik, becomes part of the world's long memory. Those actions don't resolve cleanly or disappear. They remain present through the structures that survive them. The system absorbs the damage and continues forward. Times move on, and Nosgoth keeps functioning. New Guardians are summoned to replace the fallen ones. Vampires retreat into hiding. The Pillars remain standing. The world carries on while holding the imprint of what came before. That passage of time doesn't erase the earlier violence. It folds it into the foundation of everything that follows. As you move through the game, that sense of history stays close. You aren't stepping into a fresh conflict. You're entering a cycle that has already turned many times. Roles have been filled and refilled. Damage has accumulated. Systems continue operating with all the weight inside them. Destiny in Blood Omen grows out of that continuity. Events feel guided by structures that persist across centuries. The world responds according to the rules that were set long ago. Kain's journey unfolds within that momentum, shaped by forces that were already moving when he was brought back to life. That's what gives the lore its age. It doesn't present itself through sudden revelations or dramatic turns. It feels layered and worn in. Like history that's been lived through and carried forward. You sense that weight before you fully understand it, and that feeling stays with you as the story continues. This is where Blood Omen starts laying the foundation for something much larger. The game treats Destiny as an ongoing process rather than a single moment. Ancient systems keep moving, new figures step into old roles. The world continues forward, carrying everything that happened along with it.
I was stranded here. The time-streaming device lay in pieces at my feet.
As you move through Blood Omen, the story starts to take shape in a way that feels gradual but heavy. You aren't handed a complete explanation all at once. Information arrives through conversations, encounters, and revelations that settle in over time. Each piece adds to the picture and stays with you as the journey continues. Ariel plays a key role in establishing that foundation. She explains the connection between the Pillars and the Guardians and directs Kain towards the task of restoring them. Her guidance frames the journey and gives it structure. You carry your words forward as you move through the world, even when the full meaning hasn't settled yet. Mobius enters that framework as a figure tied to knowledge and control. His identity as the Oracle of Nosgoth brings a sense of intention to the events unfolding around you. His influence reaches across history, and his involvement in the crusade against vampires adds scale to that conflict. Conversations with him carry a sense of manipulation and a long-term planning that stays persistent as the story unfolds. Mortanius adds another layer to that weight. His role as a guardian and his involvement in both Ariel's death and Kain's resurrection tie personal tragedy directly into the world's larger structure. His actions feel connected to forces beyond a single moment, and the presence of the dark entity weaves the influence deeper into the story. As these revelations accumulate, Kain's place within the system becomes clearer. The realization that he is the balanced guardian and Ariel's successor settles in gradually. His search for a cure leads him toward an understanding of what that role demands. That knowledge carries consequence and permanence. The way the game delivers these moments matter. Lore arrives through experience and not explanations. You feel the weight of these connections before every detail is clear. The story trusts you to carry that weight forward and piece it together through movement, dialogue, and time spent in the world. That approach gives the narrative a strong spine. Events feel connected even when their full meaning hasn't surfaced yet. Revelations land with impact because they confirm something that's already been present in the background of the journey. That's how Blood Omen handles its lore. It allows understanding to grow naturally, anchored by experience and repetition. The result is a story that feels dense and lived in, laying the groundwork for everything that follows without needing to spell it out all at once.
Before the Pillar of Death, I lay the Orb of Mortanius. The Pillar accepted its offering. Thus, it was restored. Anakroth's magic was contained within the metal of the scales and would eventually be released back into the pillar from whence it came. The scales of Anakroth I lay before the Pillar of States. The Pillar accepted its offering. Thus, it was restored.
As the game comes to an end, the story brings everything it's been building towards into a single decision. That decision sits at the center of Nosgoth's fate and Kain's place within it. The game presents a moment where the full structure of the world, the Pillars, and the Guardians come into focus through action rather than explanation. One path asks Kain to sacrifice himself in order to restore the pillars and return balance to the land. That act connects directly to the role of the Balance Guardian and the function of the system that governs Nosgoth. The world's health, the stability of the pillars, and the continuation of the cycle all tie into that outcome. Another path allows Kain to refuse that sacrifice. Choosing to remain alive keeps him bound to the world as it stands. Nosgoth enters a state of ruin shaped by that choice. Ariel remains trapped in her haunted state, and the damage carried by the system becomes permanent rather than resolved. That moment matters because it doesn't close the story, it locks it into motion. The consequences of Kain's decision extend beyond the immediate ending and shaped everything that follows in the series. Later canon treats the refusal to sacrifice as the path that defines the future of Nosgoth. The world continues forward carrying the result of that choice. What gives this ending its weight is how quietly it's delivered. There's no long explanation breaking down the implications. You already understand what the pillars mean. You already understand what balance requires. The decision lands because the game has spent its entire runtime teaching you how the system works. Kain's choice doesn't feel like a twist, it feels like a culmination. His survival ties directly into the collapse of the world structure. His continued existence keeps the ancient machinery of Nosgoth grinding forward in a damaged state. That's why this ending works as the foundation of a saga. The story doesn't resolve its central systems. It commits to them. The world continues. The damage remains. The consequences persist. Everything that comes next grows out of this moment. By the time the game ends, Nosgoth feels set on a path that won't correct itself quietly. The decision anchors the series in themes of fate, consequence, and continuity. One choice shapes the land, the characters, and the future of the world for everything that follows. When Blood Omen Legacy of Kain released, it landed in a strange space. Critics didn't struggle to see what it was aiming for. The story, the tone, and the voice work stood out immediately. A lot of reviews at the time focused on how serious the game felt, especially compared to other RPGs on the PlayStation. The writing carried a lot of weight, the performances gave the characters a presence, and the world felt committed to its own rules. That voice acting came up again and again in coverage. Reviewers pointed out how rare it was to hear dialogue delivered with so much intention. Characters spoke slowly, lines were given space to land, conversations felt deliberate rather than functional. That alone set Blood Omen apart from a lot of games in the same era. The atmosphere also had a lot of attention. Critics talked about how oppressive Nosgoth felt and how closely that mood was tied to the narrative. The world supported the story rather than distracting from it. The music, sound design, and pacing all fed into that sense of dread and inevitability that followed Kain through the game. There were some technical things as well. Controls came up, performance came up, load times and movement were mentioned. Those details existed alongside the praise rather than replacing it though. Most reviews treated them as part of the game's identity rather than something that erased its strengths. The overall response landed pretty positive, and the game earned strong review scores for the time. Commercially, Blood Omen performed well. It sold enough copies to be considered a success, and Crystal Dynamics publicly described it that way. That success mattered because it proved there was an audience for this kind of tone and structure. People were willing to engage with a darker story, slower pacing, and heavier themes. What matters more is what Blood Omen set into motion. This was the first entry in what would become one of the densest lore-driven franchises of that generation. The systems introduced here didn't fade away in later games, they became the backbone of the entire series. The Pillars, the Guardians, Nosgoth's decay, and Kain's role all carried forward. The later entries expanded the scope and shifted perspectives, but they remained tied to decisions and foundations established here. The ending of Blood Omen shaped the future of the franchise. The canon followed the path where Kain remained alive and the world continued forward in ruin. That choice gave the series its long-running identity. Over time, Blood Omen itself slipped into a quieter place in public conversation though. A lot of people came to the series through Soul Reaver and worked backward. For some people though, Blood Omen became something discovered later rather than remembered from release. That shift changed how often it was discussed, though it never fully disappeared. There are some fan communities that kept it alive though. Discussions around the writing, performances, and world building continued for years. People revisited it to better understand Nosgoth and Kain's arc. The game's re-release on modern platforms showed that interest never fully faded. People still wanted access to it. What's really cool though is looking back at how complete the game feels. Blood Omen doesn't read like a rough draft of ideas. It feels confident in what it presents. The lore is dense, the tone is consistent. The themes stay intact from beginning to end. That cohesion helped it age in a way that many games from the same era struggled to do. Its legacy sets in that confidence. Blood Omen proved that games could tell stories with patience and weight. It showed that a protagonist didn't need to be comforting or redeemable to carry a narrative. It laid down a world that future games could build on without needing to reinvent its core ideas. Today, it stands as the foundation of one of the most ambitious narrative franchises of its time. Even when it isn't the most talked about entry, its influence remains embedded in everything that followed. Nosgoth begins here. Kain's journey begins here. The systems that define the series all trace back to this first step. That's why Blood Omen still matters. It started something durable, its ideas held together, its world carried forward, and decades later, it still feels like a game that knew exactly what it wanted to be.
Of heart and soul, forced to the road and the long, bitter night.
Before I wrap this up, I want to talk about why this one stuck with me the way it did. I actually had Blood Omen when it first came out. This was one of the games my dad owned and really loved. I was way too young to understand what was going on, and honestly, it was just way too hard for me at the time also. I didn't make much progress. What stuck with me back then was just the feeling of it, the tone, the voice, and I enjoyed drinking blood also. But I always thought that part was cool, even if I didn't fully get it yet. Later on, I got completely pulled into Soul Reaper. I was obsessed with that game growing up. I loved the world, the characters, the atmosphere, but even then, I never really dug deep into the lore. I enjoyed it on the surface without realizing how much was sitting underneath it. Fast forward to this year, October, when I streamed Blood Omen during Jake's 31 Days of Horror. Coming back to it as an adult, it hit very differently. I was reminded how dense this series really is, how much thought went into the world, and how much weight the writing carries. That stream stayed with me. It made me want to come back and really sit with this game properly, so I did. And honestly, this ended up being one of my favorite games I've covered this year, and I got lost in the world in a way I don't often do anymore. There were multiple nights where I look at the clock and realize it was already 2 in the morning. That kind of thing doesn't usually happen often for me, and when it does, it usually means the game is doing something special. This one felt like a journey, from the writing to the voice work to the way power slowly settles into Kain's hands. It pulled me in and kept me there. Because of that, Blood Omen easily lands as one of the top games the save room has completed this year. But if you made it all the way to the end, thank you. I seriously appreciate it. If you've been enjoying these deep dives and what I'm building here, consider subbing. I'm preserving our love for these games one title at a time, and I'm building this archive slowly for me and you. Dropping a like helps a lot, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you played Blood Omen back in the day, tell me what you remember about it. If this is your first time seeing it, let me know what stood out to you. I read every comment and try to respond to as many as I can. And again, for anyone on mobile, consider tapping the hype button. It gives the video hype points and helps it get shown to more people. It essentially tells the algorithm, hey, this video is good, more people should see it. And again, we're also getting really close to 10,000 subs, which is insane to me. My goal is to try to hit it before New Year's, but I'm not sure if we're going to. It'd be really cool if we did though. But thank you all again for all the support I've gotten this year. It's turning into something life-changing, and I really appreciate you. But, as always, I'll see y'all later.
Play on, little vampire. Play on.
Fae Victus!